Hello and welcome to this beautiful drive through Telemark in southern Norway. My name is Emma and I'll be guiding you from the beginning of our drive in Dalen to the end in Heddal. So Telemark is located between Bergen and Oslo in the south. It's a couple hours drive out of Oslo. We begin in Dalen, which is in the lower left-hand corner, and then make our way through Morgedal to Rjukan and then down to Heddal. This drive begins in Dalen, which is a beautiful town I highly recommend spending the night in. Dalen is a historic town. It was founded alongside the establishment of the Telemark Canal, which is a famous boat journey that goes from Dalen to Skien. Here's a map. You can see it sort of navigates its way through lakes as it goes towards Skien. Skien is located on the coast, so historically the Telemark Canal was used to export goods out of Norway. The Dalen Hotel is a famous historic hotel. It was built here in the 1800s, and it was also built when the Telemark Canal was. During World War II, it was occupied, and the German officers used it as a resort. Most of the interior was stripped and heavily damaged. The hotel has since been restored, and today it is one of the most expensive hotels in Norway. If you do want to spend the night there, it does start at 3,000 Norwegian kroners, with rooms going up to 8,300 Norwegian kroners. So to get out of Dalen, you have to do these series of hairpin turns. On the right-hand side, you can see they do open up, so you can stop and take photos, and this is what the view looks like. So you can see Dalen is literally a valley. Dalen does actually mean valley in Norwegian. So we're just going to make our way up these series of hairpin turns as we make our way to our first stop, which is Eidsborg Stave Church. We have now arrived at the Eidsborg Stave Church, which is one of 28 remaining stave churches in Norway. It was built roughly between 1250 and 1300, and it is one of the smallest stave churches we have in the country. Additionally, it's an important pilgrimage church, and it even had its own cult. Now, it is dedicated to St. Nicholas, and there is a statue of him that was put here when the church was established. However, it is in the museum in Oslo. Every midsummer, they would give it gifts and they would say prayers to it. After that, they would wash it, and it's believed to have then had healing powers. Today, Eidsborg is located on the Pilgrims Road. If you watch my Scenic Road video, you'll see the other pilgrim church, Morgedal Stave Church. Today, this church is located in the West Telemark Museum, which is just outside Dalen, and I really highly recommend visiting it. You can park outside the church for free. We are now making our way towards the Norwegian Ski Museum at Morgedal. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about Telemark. So Telemark really is one of the most fascinating regions in Norway. It's known for several important things that we'll be talking about today. There are two parts to Telemark, the upper and the lower. We're driving through the upper region, which is much more historic and has much more to chat about. The lower region is located closer to the coast. Typically here in Telemark, everyone was an independent farmer up until quite recently. There were no towns, there was no influence from religion, and the law enforcement couldn't really get a handle of these farmers. They sort of did their own thing. So because of that, the people here in Telemark actually held on to the Old Norse religion much longer than the rest of the country. Now, lots of independent people sort of doing their own thing means that Telemark had a large number of murders. Whether or not that just means they better documented it than other parts of the country, it's not really quite known. Today, around 50,000 people live in Telemark, and the dialect is actually very close to the Old Norse language. Telemark is absolutely beautiful. You probably have heard of Telemark before, whether it be from World War II or from skiing, and those are the two topics we're going to be talking a little bit about today. We're just shooting a time-lapse now as we make our way towards Morgedal. We do start shooting in real time later in the day. This was really early in the morning. You can kind of tell this was shot at around 8 a.m. in September. We've now reached Morgedal, which is the birthplace of skiing. The skiing style, which is called Telemark skiing, was invented by Sondre Norheim, who was born and raised here in Morgedal. He was the first to develop skis that were better at going downhill and as well as turning. I do have a video of Telemark skiing available via the link in the description if you want to see what it looks like. Otherwise, you can just Google Telemark skiing and you'll see some pictures. So you can learn all about Norwegian skiing at the Ski Museum in Morgedal. We were there well before it was opening, but you can see there's a statue of Sondre outside, and this is what the building looks like. It is open all year round. Understandably today, Telemark is one of the most popular places to go skiing in Norway. We're here in September, so there is no snow, though it was starting to get very cold. You have to go really in the winter months, roughly from November through to April. Our next stop is going to be Seljord. We'll be there in a very short amount of time. We have now made it to Seljord. That is the power of the time-lapse, right? Now, Seljord is famous for its sea serpent called Selma. Now, Selma is mentioned very much in Norwegian folklore. Kind of think of her like the Loch Ness Monster. You can see her in Lake Seljord. There's also a yearly market that takes place here. It originally started as a farmer's market where people could buy and sell farm animals, but as you can see from the picture, it's basically grown into this huge festival. It gets about 80,000 visitors a year, which is more than the number of people who live in Seljord. We're just taking a quick break. While we do, this is Seljord Church. It's one of the oldest churches in Norway, built between 1150 and 1180. It's dedicated to Saint Olav, who is the saint of Norway. According to legend, you can see his face in the wall. Whether or not that is true, why don't you go check, and then you can see. We're now making our way towards the Seljord Tower. So they built this brand new tower in town, and if you go to the top of it, you can see over Lake Seljord. Here's the picture. And from there, you can spot Selma. However, it is located in this caravan park, and the caravan park makes you pay to go to the tower. The tower itself is free, but they charge for the parking. When we went, you saw we sort of went in, turned around and left. We couldn't see any information on where to park, how to pay, and how to get to the tower, so we just gave up. You might have better luck in the summer season when they expect many more people coming to look at the tower. We really wanted to get to Gaustatoppen. As you can see, it's a beautiful clear day, the day we're driving. We wanted to be on the first funicular to the top of the mountain, so we just sort of gave up, turned around and left. Enjoy the music, enjoy the drive. I will come back and talk to you about Gaustatoppen very soon. And I'm back. Unfortunately, the GoPro died just as we started to get to the pretty part of the drive. That would be right. Let me talk a little bit about Gaustatoppen. So this is a funicular that goes underground to the top of the mountain called Gaustatoppen. You sort of go through this horizontal funicular, and then halfway through you change and then take this vertical funicular. It was built by NATO during the Cold War, and it only opened for tourists in 2010. You can still see some of the NATO facility, however most of it is closed off. Unfortunately, there was one cloud hovering over the mountain when we visited, so we couldn't see the view. On a clear day, you can see 1/6 of Norway. This is what it looks like going down. The vertical funicular is very steep and slightly horrifying. You can sort of tell from this, although the video doesn't quite show how steep it is. This is what the landscape looks like near Gaustatoppen. That's what happened with us. We had one cloud hovering over the mountain, which was a shame, but that's okay. It just means we can continue our drive a little bit earlier. I would really recommend spending half a day at Gaustatoppen. There are hiking trails everywhere. There's a cafe, there's a shop. You really need the time. The funicular does take some time and it doesn't run very regularly. So also be wary of queues in the summer. I believe it only takes about 15 people, so it's very, very small. Now we're just going to backtrack a little bit and show you the drive we took when the GoPro died. The landscape here is absolutely incredible and you need to see it for yourself. So we're going to go back to where roughly it died. We'll stop and take some photos and then we make our way down to Rjukan. We have now made it down the mountain and we have arrived in Rjukan, a really fascinating historical town in Telemark. So basically, this was not a town until quite recently. In the late 19th and early 20th century, the area was discovered for its natural resources. Industrialists worked out how to utilise the cheap electricity here and built plants all throughout the region. Sam Hyde is the man who sort of discovered what Rjukan had to offer, and he actually designed and established the town in the early 20th century. He designed everything, right down to the mailboxes. He was really, really in love with this town. You'll notice it's quite dark here. Between September and March, the mountain we were just at, Gaustatoppen, blocks sunlight into Rjukan. Because of this, they've built some mirrors on the mountainside to reflect sun back into the town square. You can see it pictured right here. You can see these mirrors if you park in front of the Tourist Information Office. You can look up on the mountain and see them. And if you happen to be there between September and March, you can stand in the sunlight. It's not as powerful as maybe you'd want it to be, but it's still there. We just passed the church on the right-hand side, and now we're making our way into the older part of town. So on the left-hand side is where you'll see the Tourist Information Office, as well as the town square, where you can see this reflecting sunlight. We don't show it in this video, but after the Vemork Museum, we went and parked behind the Tourist Information Office. There is a massive car park, and we went for a little walk around the town. So that's where you can park if you want to walk around town yourself. We're just a few minutes away from the Vemork Museum. I'll come back to you very soon. We are now arriving at the Vemork Museum, which is probably one of the most famous World War II sites in Norway. It was built in the early 20th century as a hydroelectric plant, and it then quickly became famous for its production of heavy water. I'm not a scientist. I don't know too much about how heavy water works. I've written it up in my post in the description, but basically heavy water can be used to make a bomb. Because of that, when Norway was occupied during World War II, the Vemork plant became very important to the occupying German forces. Norway was the most heavily fortified country in Europe, with around 300,000 German soldiers stationed here. They used the plant to develop heavy water, forcing Norwegian workers to increase the scale of heavy water production. This was considered a serious enough threat that at least 5 separate sabotage attacks were conducted here. The most famous one involved a group of 6 Norwegians parachuting into the area and then attacking the plant in 1943. There were 3 movies made about this sabotage operation in 1948, a Norwegian, French and American one. There was another American one made later, American or British, and it starred Kirk Douglas. Now, the Norwegian movie, they actually used the original saboteurs as the actors playing themselves. And then there's this very famous end sequence that I'm now playing for you when they show the saboteur's face over the Hardangervidda plateau, and it's sort of to represent them as national heroes. This movie is available on YouTube for free if you want to watch it, but it doesn't have English translations. So you will have to find some translations elsewhere. The most recent depiction is this mini-series called The Heavy Water War, and it's in a mixture of Norwegian and English, which is useful. It's on Netflix. Vemork closed in 1971, and today it is a museum. The exhibition talks about both the industrial history of Rjukan, as well as the famous sabotage operations during World War II. Our next stop very soon is going to be Mal, which is a famous port on the Tinnsj, which is a lake. I'll come back to you very soon. We are now arriving in Mal, which is a historic pier. Basically, how this pier worked is that they had a system of trains and ferries to transport goods from the plants in Rjukan down to the pier at Skien. Remember, we talked about Skien earlier because it's on the Telemark Canal. So there was a railway that went from Rjukan to Mal, and then from there was a ferry that would transport the goods down across the Tinnsj to Tinnsj, and then from there was a train that would take it down to another pier. From that pier, it would then go onto the Telemark Canal. It's a little confusing, but if you look on a map, it does actually make pretty good sense. During the war, of course, the Germans used this to try and get their heavy water out from Vemork to Germany so they could develop a bomb. Because of this, Mal became a very important pier for sabotage operations. Very soon I'm going to show you a clip from that same Norwegian movie. Here it is. And they actually shot it in Mal, recreating the sabotage operation that took place here in 1943. What happened is that the Germans were attempting to export heavy water on a ferry, and Norwegians successfully placed explosives on the ferry, and the ferry exploded in the middle of the lake. It should be said there were civilian passengers on the ferry, but the Norwegians had planned the bombs, so while it went off in the deepest part of the lake, it also went off close enough to the land that the civilians could get help. And when the bomb did go off, farmers from around the area went out to help them. This is still from the film. You can see a map of how it's exported out of Norway. Here you can see a picture of what the ship looked like. They still have some of the ships here on display, so you can see how it works. They've even got the old train station on display. Here it is. It's very cute, and it's a very, very interesting site. They've got signs everywhere in English if you want to have a little read yourself, so you don't need to know everything before you go. Here it is. And then with that, we leave. Our last stop is the Heddal Stave Church. We are going to be driving alongside the lake, which will be on our left-hand side. It's really interesting because in recent years they actually discovered the wreckage of the heavy water ship in the lake, and they even found heavy water when they were examining the wreckage. The drive to Heddal in real time takes about 45 minutes, and there's not so much going on between Mal and Heddal. It's a very beautiful agricultural area, there's a forest, but yeah, it's all very rural. I'll come back to you when we reach Heddal Stave Church. We have now reached our last stop for the day, which is Heddal. It's located very close to Notodden. Apologies if I pronounce that horribly. Notodden is kind of like Rjukan, where it was built quite recently as an industrial centre, and there are lots of museums all about the industrial heritage in Notodden. I don't know if I'm saying that right. There's a lot of T's, a lot of D's in that word. Anyway, it's also on the UNESCO World Heritage list with Rjukan, so it's really well worth recommending. But we're not here for Notodden, we're here for Heddal. So the Heddal Stave Church is the largest stave church in Norway. Look at this massive car park. The biggest stave church deserves a massive car park. The Heddal Stave Church is one of 28 remaining stave churches in the country, and it is one of the best preserved. So here it is. It is very important because a lot of people use it when rebuilding and restoring the other stave churches in Norway. It was built around the early 13th century, and it's not known how important or why it was built on this site. It's just managed to survive all the changes in history throughout the years. You can see the nice details of dragons on the roof as well. So when it was restored in the 1950s, they discovered a lot of ornaments inside, and you will see a lot of this now if you go inside the church. It is possible to visit inside. You do have to pay an admission fee, of course. There is a large red barn you'll see when you park, and they also have an exhibition inside. Behind the church, you'll also see an outdoor museum, which has farm buildings collected from around the area. This is where the drive ends. So after Heddal, we went to Kongsberg, which is a really nice place. I highly recommend going there yourself. It's a historic mining town, so they've got all the old mines there. It was built up by the Danish. And then the following day, after leaving Kongsberg, we head north to the Morgedal Valley. That will be my next video. It's a beautiful valley. I hope you watch it as well. I also hope you enjoyed this drive through beautiful Telemark. Thank you so much for watching.